Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
Morning, Rob. How are you?
Great to have you aboard, mate. And we had an earlier guest by the name of Cameron Ling, who is probably no bigger footy head than what you are. So at this particular time of the year when we were anticipating such a great year, not only for the Richmond Footy Club, where you do a bit of work, but also the Werribee Central's Footy Club, who were fantastic last year and were the early favourites for the Geelong and District flag. But it's all been pulled away, nothing to do. How are you coping, firstly, and a serious question, because people's well-being is very important at this stage, but how are you coping personally with this change to your life?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was reflecting that I think this is probably the biggest break I've had from footy in about 20 years, I reckon. So, yeah, I think like most footy tragics, mate, when you've been around the game for a while, you don't really know anything else. But that footy starts and it takes up most of your year, and certainly once you get into coaching, it's almost a 12 month of the year role. So, yeah, pretty lost without it, and I guess it hit me a bit last night because today would have been round one, and we'd done the majority of the hard work. You get that little tease of a couple of practice matches, and then it was all pulled away. So yeah, but doing okay. I'm fortunate that my work hasn't been directly affected, even though I work for Richmond. I don't work in the footy department there, so yeah, my work's been okay and my family's okay, and those two things are really important at the moment because I know a lot of people are a lot worse off.
Now, this time of the year, you probably wouldn't get to see the family all that much. You're seeing them all the time now. How's that change been?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I actually had planned last weekend was a weekend away with my wife because I do that strategically at the start of every season to sort of, give her the last kiss before you don't see her for a few months. Yeah, so it's interesting now. One, we didn't need that weekend off, and two, she's seeing a lot more of me than she needs to, I'd imagine.
Let's dissect the Richmond part of your world before we deal with the Centrals. I was fascinated this week. It's the first time I knew that, and I feel very bad that I hadn't worked out that before. But give us an indication of what your role is inside a huge and the most popular Victorian football club now. Yeah,
last year I secured a role there just as a program educator for their Richmond Institute of Sport Leadership. So it's one of their non-footy sort of income arms because they're one of many clubs who sort of look for alternate ways that is not linked to footy. So you can imagine we're fairly important to the club right now when everything else stops. And then this year got promoted up to sort of manager of that program. So basically, yeah, we have about almost 200 students doing online learning for a double degree in leadership and management and sport and development. I'm sort of, the lead educator on the leadership and management side of things, and I'm kind of the campus manager for the Melbourne site because they also deliver into Alba, Wodonga and Mildura.
And that's tied in, presumably, hi Nick, it's Neil, presumably tied in with Swinburne, is it?
Yeah, which is amazing. Yeah, that was part of the Swinburne relationship, and then so we're actually seconded by Swinburne. So, yeah, we actually work for Swinburne, and then I sort of lent out to Richmond to deliver that course. So, yeah, it's a great relationship. It obviously solidifies that sponsorship arrangement that they have, and from our perspective, it's a great program, and we get a lot of access to Richmond players and staff, and we base ourselves at the Swinburne Centre at Punt Road 1 day a week, and yeah, it's fantastic. It's just a great opportunity, especially for footy tragics, in young people who want to get work in the industry and also want to get that qualification because they do all their volunteer hours with Richmond. So it's it's a very clever arrangement from all sides.
This is a fascinating subject. I remember talking a few years ago in an interview with David Parkin about this situation where in the 70s and 80s football clubs were bringing business models in to improve their structures, and then they got so good at it that businesses are now bringing football models into to train their leadership groups and management teams. Are you finding that although they're totally different, the parallels with controlling it are very similar?
Yeah, for sure. And that's what we find is, you imagine, mate, imagine the quality of guest speakers we have access to. So Peggy O'Neill, Brendan Gale, Damien Hardwick, experienced players, and then, of course, all of their staff who are renowned now throughout the industry for, being on the edge for membership and corporate support and all those sorts of stuff. So we get access to those guys as our kind of guest speakers and key information providers for our students. So, yeah, very fortunate. I know I've learned a lot too. And we also have Lisa Alexander and Lydia Lasselow are the other two ambassadors, and so they come in and input as well. So, yeah, the students are pretty fortunate, and I'm certainly enjoying the ride. And
you left out my favourite, Neil Baum, who had a significant impact at this football club in town and probably still underrated, and coincidentally he arrives at Richmond and things change there. So have you had access to him as well?
Oh, I haven't as much, because he tends to... One of the things that we struggle with is that certainly once the footy season starts, that's a real machine, the footy side of it. So we tend to get more access to the non-footy elements of it during the year. But he's a great supporter of it, but we don't get much access to him. He tends to be very full on in his role with the players once the season starts. So.
Now might be the time to jump, mate.
Well, put it this way, there's a lot of available people now, so that's why our online program is going to look a lot different this year. We're quite excited by it.
Oh, Rob and I are available if you needed to, how not to do radio. That's our specialty program.
No worries.
Let's shift camp to the Centurions, Nick. I know internally a lot of footy clubs have expectations pre-season now. What were the different expectations you had starting 2020 that you had in 2019 after what was a pretty impressive second half of the season for you?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because this time last year our goal was finals. We felt like if a few more things had gone our way in 18, that we probably could have or should have made finals in that year, and so it was finals or bust for us last year. And to get to the prelim was, to be honest, probably went then above expectations, but it's funny because when you get to the prelim, you can just taste that grand final. So, our hashtag for the year has been unfinished business, so we feel like we've only got that one step to go or two steps to go, and so we went out recruiting for now, and we think we're pretty heavily in that premiership window, and we were pretty excited about what we added and how that might look once the season starts.
You said finals or bust last year. Would this year have been premiership or bust, or were you a little bit more casual on that?
Interesting because, if I say that, I'm setting myself up to not be working there much longer. Got the plan. But I think it is important that you set goals, because I know that some players, if you just said, hey, it'd be okay if we made the finals, some players settle on that. But I think we've got a pretty hungry group, and so I wanted to put it this way, putting a premiership or bust on them last year was unrealistic and it's unfair. Still had a young group, any new players were still gelling. But even the small glimpse I got of them in the practice matches, we were going to be a lot better.
Yeah.
So, but I also realised that one thing that's happening in the GDFL is everyone's getting better, and that's what we ran into the last couple of years. Like you run into a team like Thompson. It's ironic they didn't win it, but that they were just miles ahead of the whole comp really for that whole year, and that's what we're trying to create. I'm really keen to leave a legacy beyond when I finish up. I love this club. I had all of my best success as a player at this club, and having the opportunity to come back sort of 20 years later and be able to be part of maybe getting it back near the top, even just a small part of that, it's certainly something that I'm keen to do, and that if or when I finish up, I want to have put them in a place where they're set up for a long time. And as you know, I reckon 10 of our best 20 players are still only 20.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the last time we spoke. I recall being at Inverleigh late 2018 when you surprisingly beat them there, and I was in their rooms having an ale, and the team wandered in the club uniform, and it looked like the under-18 team, not the senior team. Have you been able to keep all that group, and do you feel that group of players want to taste success at this club for a long period of time?
Yeah, look, that's it. To me, what I always work on is you've got to build a club that people like to be at. Like, put aside coaching and strategy and structure and talent. Guys like to be at a good place, and so that's why I've put all my emphasis on. I'll just get my dog out of the way. I've put all my emphasis on making sure that you build a good culture, and that starts at the top. It starts with good people. It starts with leadership, and so what we've done is pretty much since I've been here, we haven't lost any players other than to unique circumstances. So this year we lose Josh Sloan and Sleep Dalton as a couple of our young crew, but again, they're off trying to pursue the punting dream over in America. But aside from that, we haven't lost any of that young crew. And I'll tell you what, they're going to be a scary group in 3 or 4 years when they all hit sort of mid-20s and have played. And remember, by mid-20s, most of them are going to have played about 100 or more senior games.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm excited about that, and that does put the club in a good position. And at the moment, it allows us to sort of just recruit with more of a top-up approach rather than, growing the base, because I'm really confident and comfortable that the core of our team is going to, hopefully, is going to stay Centurions for the next 5 or 10 years.
Internally around Geelong, there is the Ballerine League and Geelong Footy League. So when a good kid pops their head up in the GDFL, the opportunity to move, they're plentiful. There'll be recruiters everywhere, and there's probably a dollar or two being thrown about. In the Werribee region, what's the biggest concern for your club where your players may be lured away?
Oh, we have massive concerns with that, because even the lowest competition in the WRFL has a bigger budget. So they can get poached by a Division 2 team, so they have Premier, Division 1 and Division 2, which can be quite a low standard of footy, but they have a lot of money. So I think their budget is, it's like 120, 150, and then their Premier League is like 240. So, we get heavily poached, and that's why we've got to create a place that they don't want to leave. And one of the challenges that we have is most playing lists, if you look at them, they're not getting better. Like, they're not just naturally getting better. Most playing lists, they'll be at the level that they will stay, or they're dropping. But we've got a list where 10 or 15 of our players are still getting better, and that does make it dangerous, because it also means, as you can imagine, mate, trying to count the pennies. It also has a lot of our players looking for extra money every year as they improve. So, it's a real balance, especially considering that, even in, like you said, even in the Geelong area, it's the lowest salary cap, but in our area it's even worse, because the caps are even higher. So we don't tend to get a lot of pressure from Geelong. We certainly haven't lost any players to there. But our local area, I think we worked out, there's like 20 teams, I think, in that sort of Werribee area. It's insane.
Because Werribee is now part of the western suburbs. It's no longer a little town to the fringe, when it was the case when I was a kid. So, yeah, you're definitely much right in the thick of it.
When he was a kid, Cobb and Co stopped there.
That's true. Nick, thank you so much. I know you'll be doing it tough. I've seen you up close, and you're a very intense man on Saturday afternoons in the winter, and I reckon you'd be doing it pretty hard. But we're thinking of you. Thanks for your time, and hopefully before the scheduled season runs out, we might get you back in for a chat again. Yeah,
well, I'm hoping that there is a season, mate, and that we can talk footy later in the year.
Good on you, Nick. Thank you very much. Nick
Thanks,
Smith,
Nick.
coach of the Werribee Central's Footy Club, Geelong District Footy League, a big part of this station. Obviously, it's not here, but we'll be touching base with other coaches, netballers, players as the year goes on, just to see how they're coping with this new world.